All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
camera,
to go.
one.
Talent,
Ready, camera,
roll
two.
for record.
2,
One.
1, roll for record.
New Hampshire is feeling the burn, and unfortunately for the Democratic establishment, penicillin can't fix this one. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. On the last episode of The Rundown, we talked about the Republican results in New Hampshire. Now we're going to take a look at the Democrats. Bernie Sanders completely crushed Hillary Clinton. Let me repeat that. He crushed Hillary Clinton, 60% to 38%. For counting delegates, Bernie gets 13, while Hillary gets 9. If you've been following along with us on poll position, you know that most every poll predicted this result, so it's no surprise to either campaign, but we shouldn't underestimate the significance of an elderly socialist nut winning by more than 20 points over Hillary Clinton, the it girl, the queen of the Democratic machine. But can Sanders keep it going? He's starting to surpass Hillary Clinton in fundraising and clearly has all the left's enthusiasm in his corner. But South Carolina and Nevada are next, and Hillary is assumed to have a huge lead, huge, Donald Trump would say, and maybe even Bernie Sanders, with minority voters in those states. Joining me to talk about Hillary's rough night and what comes next is author and political satirist Scott Ott in Dallas, Texas. And here in studio, we're joined by stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. You know, this has to be, outside of her wedding night, the worst night of Hillary's life, because she went out and got crushed by a guy who has zero chance at winning a general election. How embarrassing was this for her?
Worst night of her life was the one night they had sex to conceive Chelsea.
Oh,
that was the worst. Yeah, but you know what? I don't think it was a disaster because God bless the Democrats. They find a way to rig the system every time. That 13-9 with the superdelegates, it's 15 for her, 13 for him. I don't know how they do it. My daughter was asking me about it, and I said, look, honey, I don't know what kind of voodoo the Democrats work in their process here. So even if you take away the superdelegates and everything, the 13-9, how do you win by that large a percentage and still like, okay, I've got 4 more delegates now? It's just, so I don't think it was that bad.
And there was no coin tosses involved
No
here.
coin toss. So I don't really think it was that bad for her. She had a little more spring in her step last. I don't know. The speech was a little eerie. She was dressed like a lesbian Episcopalian bishop, and Bill was back there doing his crypt keeper thing where he's so but I really don't think it was that awful. I think she feels buoyed by the fact that she's going to South Carolina where the firewall exists, but I reject the notion that the firewall is that strong anymore because Bernie's been getting some in-state support from African-American representatives and state-level officials.
On the Democratic side, they vote in reverse. So Nevada comes before South Carolina. I think he's got a better shot in Nevada than he does in South Carolina. Now, Scott, let's turn to you for this one. Last night, after the results came in, and it was obvious that Hillary Clinton was going to lose, all the networks already declared Bernie the winner. She got up and she went through a laundry list of grievances that Democrats have with Republicans, and the Democrats have been trying to do for years and years and years. What did you make of her concession screech?
That's a good way to define it. She shouted all the way through it, and it was fascinating to me because they had actually mustered up an enthusiastic crowd for her. I don't know how many were, paid Hollywood actors, but they had a whole room full of people who were cheering wildly for her. She would not take a breath during that speech. She just plowed through that thing. She talked over the crowd's, applause and laughter, or whatever they were doing. She just kept chugging on. You could tell she wanted to get off of that stage as rapidly as possible because she was at loser central right there, and everybody in the nation was watching the loser. So she ran through that speech. Her husband is standing back there, slack-jawed, bovine-like. He looked like he needed one of those Jacob Marley jaw slings to hold his mouth up. It just reeked of failure there. I think that Hillary she knew coming into this, and they immediately dismissed it. They said, well, this was expected, and we're moving on to my firewall. She is going to come to a shocking surprise when she gets to some of these other states, because I think a lot of the African-American vote that's supposed to be solidly in her corner is going to shift over to Bernie when they realize the stench of loss is heavy upon her.
Is there a shakeup coming to Hillary land? Could we see Sidney Blumenthal and David Brock back to running the show for her? The aggressive ones, the nasty ones?
I think that's a very real possibility. I think there's got to be some kind of discussion internally right now about what do we do to shake this up. Or they're so oblivious. You know, they could be, she was the presumptive the coronation just like Jeb was. They may be so old school, so delusional that they don't know they have a problem. They may not know they have a problem until after South Carolina, I think. But the demographic breakdowns in this for the young people. I mean, I've always dismissed the youth vote because it never quite materializes the way everybody says it's going to materialize. Bernie Sanders may be the first guy to get young people to actually come out and vote, because the youth breakdown for him, I think, was over 70% voted for him in New Hampshire, and he's not, and he's beating her with women too. So he's like, they've got to look at the breakdowns of that and the exit polls, and it can't be comforting to them.
Scott, put your Johnny Carson turban on here for a second and look into the future for me. Let's say what Steven Cruiser suggested happens, which is that Bernie wins the primaries, Bernie wins the vote, but she ends up with the nomination because the Democrats rigged the system through superdelegates so that she ends up with more delegates than Bernie. And the left goes absolutely bonkers because their guy got the screw job and is now off the ticket because Democratic elites had it in for them. What then happens as the Democrats have their convention in Philadelphia and march towards the general election?
I think you got Chicago 68 all over again. I mean, they are not going to be satisfied with this. After all, Bernie Sanders' entire campaign is predicated on the notion that powerful moneyed interests are scuttling democracy and are depriving you of an actual vote and a voice. And this would just reinforce what Bernie has been saying all along. I mean, this candidate, we've got a Hillary Clinton who is losing by 10% among women to Bernie Sanders, whose justification for running is the fact that she's a woman. She said in a recent speech, what's more progressive than a woman as president? Of course, the answer is a socialist as president. And Bernie has that nailed. And Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz have both blown the opportunity to scuttle Bernie's campaign because they won't make a distinction between socialism and the Democratic Party.
And this is the second time they've rigged the system to screw Bernie. They rigged the debates so that Bernie wouldn't have the opportunity to go out there mano a mano with Hillary and debate the issues. Bernie campaigned on that issue, complained about it. Now they added more debates. And now that Martin O'Malley has dropped out, Bernie's up there at a podium right next to Hillary where it's one-on-one. It raises his stature, so that's going to benefit him. That blew up in their face like a hillbilly's rifle. And now they're rigging the system with the votes with the superdelegates. I think Bernie has all of the moral authority on the Democratic side and could really just beat her over the head with this all throughout the campaign.
Bernie's going to have to want to win. We've discussed that before. At some point, he's going to actually have to want to really take it to her hard. He can't keep screaming about Citizens United and everything else because his own campaign is undermining that. If he's destroying the notion that only big money can propel a campaign. He's got the momentum right now. He's got serious momentum like you haven't seen in a long time. I mean, Trump kind of started up high, so you can't really say he's got a new thing that's pushing him because he started up high. Bernie's just getting this wave that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger behind him. And, Scott has mentioned several times that Hillary's going to start calling him a racist. Now, what I think is going to get even worse than the racism charges against Bernie is the pandering. Somebody on Twitter last night said she's going to start campaigning in cornrows soon because she is going to pander. And that's what she did last night. She came. I wouldn't be surprised if she divorces Bill and marries DeRay McKesson from Black Lives Matter in the next week, okay? She is going to pander. She's going to do everything she can. And I don't know if it's going to work because, I think that they're dismissing the African-American youth vote, too, because the kids, they love them some Bernie Sanders right now. I can't explain it, but they do. I've got a kid right now. She's not a huge Bernie fan at the moment, but I know a lot of her friends are.
Does Bernie, Scott, go to the South? We know so many southern states are voting on Super Tuesday. We have South Carolina coming up after Nevada. Does he go there and campaign hard, or does he cherry pick states where he can really run up the score? Does he go to Colorado, which votes on Super Tuesday, and Vermont, and Massachusetts, and Minnesota, and just campaign hard in those states?
I think he can campaign anywhere, frankly, and I don't think it's a racial thing. I really think that he speaks to young people who believe that, what they don't realize is that there used to be an economy before Barack Obama's presidency, and they blame everything on the system. And Bernie says, we're going to start a revolution. We're going to overthrow the system. It's those darn billionaires. They have all the money. The money has shifted to them over the last 10 years and away from you, and we're going to get it back. And that message is going to resonate with anybody who's been suffering through trying to make a living in this economy, trying to get a job in this economy when 95 million people are out of the workforce. So I think he's going to make a play for South Carolina. I think he's going to do better than anybody expects in South Carolina. And I think he is viable in any one of these states. And Hillary Clinton ignores his message at her own peril.
And you know what? There's a common theme that runs through both the Republican side of the aisle and the Democratic side of the aisle in the southern states. And that's that populism works. And if there's anything that Bernie Sanders has right now, and same thing works, by the way, on the other side for Donald Trump, it's a populist image that will resonate with Southern voters. And if he goes down there and he beats her up on trade, and he beats her up on all those populist themes, I could easily see him competing with her in South Carolina.
He can annihilate her on the themes right now, because what the Democrats have been doing for years is all this demagoguery against Republicans. It's coming up with these economically infeasible but emotionally appealing grand themes that are just fun to say. And he's out democrating Hillary Clinton right now. She's trying to go in these little specifics, and he's doing these sweeping themes that don't mean anything, that would be an absolute disaster for this country. Let's not get away from that for too long. Absolute disaster, but it sounds nice. Free, 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 free. He can whip them into a frenzy because he's giving them whatever they want at the moment. And I think he's going to wipe her out sooner rather than later. They're going to have to really be obvious about rigging the system to get her through this.
Scott?
John, can I piggyback on something that Stephen said? Because I think we can't underestimate this. Donald Trump was already universally known. He had universal name recognition before this campaign started, and he has now risen head and shoulders above effectively 7 dwarves, relatively unknown people with the exception of Jeb Bush. But Jeb Bush himself wasn't really known. It was just the Bush name that was known. Bernie Sanders was an utterly unknown senator from Vermont that had not done anything that anybody knew about. And he came out, and he is now crushing the most powerful Democratic campaign and electoral machine that has ever existed, with the exception of Barack Obama's. He is kicking her butt. And I would not underestimate his winning instinct. I mean, this kid used to run track. He can play a little basketball. I think he's got the killer instinct. I don't know if it'll come out in the form of negative campaigning from him, but he is committed to winning this race. And again, Hillary Clinton ignores this at her own peril. Maybe she should marry DeRay McKesson, because I understand he's running for mayor or something somewhere. Yes. At least she'll be able to stay in politics.
I want to shoot down one myth. And this is a myth that the Clinton campaign is putting out. And they said, well, come on. Bernie Sanders only won in New Hampshire, and he won by a wide margin because he's a son of New England, and sons of New England always do well in New Hampshire. That's true if you come from Massachusetts, because the Boston media market bleeds into New Hampshire. So if you're John Kerry or you're Paul Tsongas or you're Mitt Romney, yeah, it helps you. But guess what? The Burlington media market doesn't bleed into New Hampshire. The Burlington media market is a market that pretty much just stays in Vermont. So they have no clue who the hell this guy is in New Hampshire. This was a race where he just beat her pants off.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a very good chance he may have won Iowa, too. I mean, the DNC won't release the final tallies there, and he shouldn't have even been competitive there if you're just using the Northeastern. He should have gotten his clock cleaned there. So everything that she's going to try to do, it's her imperiousness and her dismissiveness of Bernie that's been killing her so far in this. And I think that's so natural in her that she can't get rid of it, and she can't hide it. She can't hide her disdain for the fact that I want to congratulate Senator Sanders. I mean, if Vince Foster's car is still out there, Bernie might not wake up in it one day.
All right. Dave just came in my ear and said the guy without the purple tie gets the last word. I think that means you.
That's fair. That's only fair, man.
All right. What do you think? Will Hillary recover as the campaign moves south and west? I think I've flown on that airline once or twice. Or is Sanders' socialist surge only just the beginning? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.